Oh, oh. I'm just thinking to myself here, thinking about how this whole thing is going to go together. Last time you guys were here, went over to the chop saw. We cut our pieces for my box, the exact size that they had to be. I had to allow for the size of these pieces because there's going to be a dovetail. Unlike these that have miters, I don't have to worry about that. When I think about this, there's also another added part that I have to worry about, which is using that dovetail jig. Dovetail jig is one of the easiest things that we can use in here, but the important thing is all you have to do is master it one time. If you master it one time, then I guarantee every dovetail that you cut after that is going to be super easy. You have to keep in mind that there's about 6 things that you have to go through, a sequence, a step part. First thing of which is where I'm at right now, and that is to mark this how I want this box to go. If I look at this box, this person took a lot of care, as did this person, a lot of care on the parts that they wanted to see. Just like with anything, the good part should fit on the outside where everybody sees it. So if there's anything that's bad about these parts, you want to try to keep that on the inside because the box is basically closed for probably 98% of its entire life. You're only going to see this inside probably 2% when you look on the inside of that. And even that inside isn't going to look bad no matter how bad the inside is. So what I want to do first is I'm going to set this up as if it were a drawer. I'm going to pretend that this is the drawer. Here's my drawer front. These are the sides. Here's the back. So what side do I want to see the most? What side do I want the grain to be showing is the front outside of this box. I'm really not concerned necessarily about the back side, not necessarily concerned about the inside of this. It's kind of like that short table project where the most important part that you're going to see is going to be the bottom shelf, the part that's facing up. Well, this is the side that you're going to see the most. So I want this side to look the best, this side to look the best, and this side. To do this, I'm going to get a pencil, not a Sharpie, and I'm not going to do this in blood. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this box up exactly the way I want it to appear. So I'm going to look at this. Look at that grain, look at this grain. This has that kind of dark look to it, kind of like my dog, just a little bit. I kind of like this side better. Now let's take a look at this side. I got that side, I got this side. That's that darkness too. I kind of like this side. I think this side I'm gonna have as my outside. Out of these two, I'm gonna have this as my inside. And let's take a look at the sides. This has the dark too. Will that dark match up with that dark? If I dovetail that together, kind of cool. Maybe I'll have that one go that way. This was my chip. Remember that chip? I'm going to have that on the inside. So in order to have that on the inside, got a little chip there. Which was the better of the two? I think maybe this part is the better of the two. That's how my box is going to go together. What I kind of like about this is it's a cool size box. It's not your conventional square, although this looks great, this one looks great, that one looks great. They all look great, but I just like something that's a little unusual. The next thing that I'm going to do is one of the 5 or 6 things that you have to be able to do in order to put this whole thing together and cut it on the jig. And that is, I'm going to put an X on the inside surface of all my pieces. So if you take a look, drop it down. I'm going to put an X there. I'm going to put an X there. I'm going to put an X here. I'm going to put an X here. Put them back together. And remember we said this is my drawer. So this is the front side that I'm going to see. I'm going to label this as if it were the front of the drawer. This is the left front. So guess what the old character is going to do? A little LF there. I'm going to put an LF on this side because this LF has to line up with that LF. This is my front left. This right here would be my left rear. So I give it a little LR and a little LR. a little RR and a little RR. That's not rest and relaxation. A little RF, because that's going to be my right front, and a little RF on this side. Keeping in mind, these are sides. This is a front and back. Now we'll take all these pieces over to that dovetail jig and we'll try to make sense of that. Ready? Come on, kids. Let's go. Something about this jig that you should know. It has been set up for you. If you have one of these at home, there is a little bit of work that you have to do to get it to set up right. These stops over here are adjustable. There's an Allen screw that you would go in there with and adjust these. I did this years ago, so right now this is all set. So if you're working in my shop, all you have to do is line these up, lock them in place, take your router and start routing. That's what we're going to try to do today. First thing I do want to check is to see if this has been set up to accept my 5/8 thick pieces of wood. So I'm going to take my board, just stick it into the jig. I'm going to come over here to the right-hand side, and there's a locking lever like a cam. When I tighten that down, it definitely tightens down. So that right now, for this side, is set up absolutely perfectly fine. It should be pretty accurate for this one too, and it is. Somebody obviously used this the last time with 5/8 thick stock. Let me check to see if I'm lucky enough to have it work out for the top. I'll take it, tighten it down. This side it doesn't. You notice this thing cams all the way back. So what the shop teacher is going to do is he's going to take this, and I'm going to tighten. There's a little nut on here. I'm just going to tighten that down a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm imagining it's the same measurement. When I tighten this down, I kind of want this handle to cam about halfway back. This is a little bit less than halfway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen this up a little bit more and see if this handle will cam a little bit more than halfway, and it does on this side. See if it works the same way on this side. Nope, doesn't go more than halfway. So I'm going to loosen it up a little bit, tighten it down. I'll go just a little bit more. This is an adjustment, folks. If you're a student in my class, you don't want to make. Don't change any of these measurements. What you want to do is just come over and I'll set this up for you, and it's really not a big deal to do. But right now, I want to make sure that this piece is going to lock in place, and it feels like it will. We don't want these pieces to move. If it moves, you're screwed, totally screwed. So we want to make sure that these are super tight, all right? You ready for the 5 or 6 things you have to know? Shall I write them on the board? I had a nice fresh piece of chalk. Of course, it's here. After those sides have all been labeled, left front, left rear, right front, now we have to think. Here's my number one thing. The X faces out. I want to make sure the X faces out every time I set that jig up. The sides will always go on the front face of the jig. The side goes on the front face of the jig.
X faces.
X faces up towards you. X faces you. I'm sorry. Snap. You. The X is going to face you. The side is going to be on the front of the jig, and it's going to face out with the X. The front and backs are going to go on the top of the jig, and same way. It's going to face X out towards you. Right now, this makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. No sense. The writing, or I should put R-I-D-I-N-G because nobody spells anything right anymore. The writing that you just labeled will always go up against the locating pin. The writing goes up against, and you're trying to go, okay, I'm writing. No, don't think of any of this stuff. When we go over there, we're going to do all this. The next thing, after the writing goes up against the locating pin, you have to make sure that the joint is tight. And the washers on my jig are going to go in back of the finger template. The washers go in back of the template. If you could remember all that, man, you're a heck of a lot better person than I am, Gunga Din. You want to try it? We'll start. The only reason why I wrote all that stuff up there is so I could use it as kind of like a checklist for me because I'm losing my mind. All right, come on, let's go. Let's do this. Ready? Here we go. Oh. I shouldn't even write that because it really applies to this. Come over here, cameraman. I am going to tell you, kids, you are going to cut the right front and the left rear on the left side of the jig. You are going to cut the right rear and the left front on the right side of the jig. It does not mean you're going to cut the right front with the left rear. Remember, the right front are two pieces. The left rear, two pieces. Those two pieces are going to be cut at the same time on the same side of the jig. Okay? So now you're going to tell me what corner do you want to start out doing this with? Is it going to be the left front, left rear, right front? Go ahead. You. What? I can't hear you. What? What is it? Oh, you want to cut the right front first? All right. You got to talk louder. And speak up a little bit. This camera's hard. Clunk, clunk, clunk. You got to speak up. All right. I'm going to put my glass on so I could read what I wrote. Move my router out of the way. You say you're going to do the right front first. So the right front is composed of this piece over here and this piece over here. So the right front, and here's the right front. These two are going to go together. Here's the way it's set up. I said to you that the front and back is going to go on the top side of the jig, right? The front is going to go on the top side of the jig with the riding part up against the locating pin and the X facing out. So that right there is everything. Everybody see that? See what I did there? Okay? I'm just going to place this. I'm not going to lock it down. I just want to place it so it stays in there so you can understand this. Now I'm going to get the other right front, which is which piece? Over here. The X is going to face out. And the writing is going to go up against this locating pin. I'm going to take this, just place this in place. I'm not setting it up with anything. I just want to tighten that down so that stays. Okay, let's talk about what he said as far as the joint goes. Take a look at this. You'll notice that this gap here, this joint is open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen up this top piece, that front, slide this over so now it's nice and tight. It's also up against the locating pin. Can you see that? Huh? Huh? Can you see it's up against the locating pin? Now I'm going to lock it in place. That is the first piece that I'm going to lock down. Right now, that is set up perfectly because I did it. The next thing that I want to do is I want to make this top end exactly even with that surface. And I'm going to show you a little trick that I have. I got this little hammer that I've fallen in love with. I used to hate it. Somebody left this in the shop, and I'm going, we never use this. I use this all the time for little adjustments now. I'm going to loosen up the cam. I'm going to slide this exactly down, and I am going to raise this up slightly. I'm talking about 1/128th of an inch above that surface. You can't tell. I can tell because I can feel it. It's a little bit raised up above. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten this in place. But come over here, cameraman. Notice that this edge is up against the locating pin. So my edge is up against the locating pin, edge is up against the locating pin. The writing side, that RF is up against the side that has the locating pin. And I'm going to make this exactly even. I said it's raised up just a little bit. I'm going to take my hammer, tap it down where it's tight. And right there, that feels really exactly even. Go ahead, feel it, cameraman. I'm gonna make sure that this is really tight because I did my push-ups today. And now I'm almost all set to make sawdust. I said to you that these washers have to go in back of the finger template. Here's the finger template. I take the finger template, I place this inside that little handle that I'm gonna tighten down. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put pressure on the finger template here. Some people will set up one side and then they set up the opposite side over here. I don't know why, I've always gotten to the habit of doing one at a time. So what I'm gonna do is just put pressure on this over here, push it all the way back, and I'm gonna snug this little handle down, not super tight, just so that it's snug. And on this side, I'm gonna leave it wherever it lays. I'm not gonna push it down. I'm gonna tighten this down as well, keeping pressure over here. So right now, I tighten this down. This jig, the finger template should be flat down on this board. I notice sometimes when I tighten it too much, it kind of lifts up. But right now, it's nice and flat, so that's good. This side is just snug, just supporting it. The finger template is in place and everything lines up, the locating pins. Now, you're gonna ask me a question. This thing is set up wrong. Why? Because you're gonna tell me this edge does not line up with that edge. It's supposed to be that way. These dovetails are offset, which means that this side is really gonna go up here, this side is really gonna go down here. So right now you look at it and you go, it really doesn't make any sense. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to make this one cut and see if this does work. This gets to be a little sticky because what I found out with this dovetail jig is that if I'm using a router, and I know every kid wants to look and see wood being cut, if I put my face down so I can see the bit routing this material out, what will happen is my face is going to be filled with the dust that I'm cutting from the router. So what I really want to do is kind of stand on top of this. If you're going to do this in my class, I'll guide it for you. And what you could do is you'll turn it on and you'll actually move it in between each one of these finger templates to make the cut. Let's take a look at this router. I have this placed in the plug only because I don't want to have to re-plug it in. And I'm just gonna point out something to you. This router bit, which is 3/8 of an inch long from the edge of this collar, is fitting into the collar, which is going to ride right inside these little grooves. You never ever want to lift this router up because if you lift it up, you'll notice what will happen to the jig. This is only aluminum and you'll actually grind down the jig. So you don't want to do that. We're gonna place this flat down so that the table of router is located on top of those finger templates. We're gonna go across to clean up some material. Then what we'll start to do is go inside each one of these finger templates. And when we finish, we'll shut it off and we'll let it stay right on the finger template. We won't move it away from there because we don't want to route inside that finger template. So let me get ready. I'll take those pieces, slide those off. I'm going to put my safety glasses on, roll up my sleeves. I'm going to take the router. I used to have a D-handle router, which I used to love, simply because of the fact that you could control it a lot better. With this router, it's a little bit more difficult because the two handles, if I'm holding onto this and I tell you to turn it on, it's difficult for you to turn it on. So what I really like is to get another D-handle router, which worked out great. You could kind of hold on to the router and turn it on by yourself without having a router torque. Generally, and this is a pretty powerful router, if I turn this on, this router is going to move. It's going to turn on its own. It will torque. So what I want to do is, as you learn from the table saw, the jointer, the chop saw, I never put a cutting tool up against the piece of wood. what I want to do is always want to make sure that this is off of the wood. And I know it's difficult to see that, but the bit is over there away from the wood. When I turn this on, I'm going to slowly move it into the wood. Any questions? No? Okay, let's give it a shot. I'll hold on to the router. And by the way, folks, you have to be strong with this. When I turn this on, I'm holding on to it. Take the cord, put it over top of my shoulder. What I'm going to do is place this on the router finger temple, and I'm just going to go across. Once, twice. I just want to show you what I did. Trying to make it easier, I want to try to take off as little as I can with that router bit because it bogs down. You're taking off a lot of material. I took off some material here to make it a little bit easier. I'll probably take a little bit more off here. And then I'm going to roll the router inside each one of the finger templates. You'll be able to see that a little bit better. So I take the router again. I'm resting it on the finger template. I turn it on. Come all the way down to here, and just by feel, I'm going to roll it in. Roll it right on around. And I started here, I'm going to roll it right on around. Roll it around. Roll it around. The worst you can do is lift it up. You'll go right through that aluminum template. I shut it off, hold on to it with both hands until it comes to a complete stop. And now I want to put this router away from me. To put it down, I hold on to the router. What I'm going to do is always put it so that the bit is away from me and I rest it on the table. This is what you would have on your face if your head was right at that level. Let's take a look at what I've done here. So I've gone in here and routed each one of these. I went across, I kept it flat. And if you notice, it looks pretty even. I don't have any parts where it's kind of lifted up at all. So I did a pretty nice job of setting this up. Let me take the finger template out and we'll see how this works. I'm going to loosen up the cam for the side. Loosen up the cam for the top. And now I'm going to put this thing together.
You're not too good at puzzles, are you?
Let's see. That's a smaller side dovetail. That looks like a small, oh, maybe it goes, oh snap. I think I've discovered something. Oh yes, those dovetails line up. That looks pretty good. If I tap this down, there is definitely resistance with that. The worst thing you could do is become overzealous. If I took this hammer and hit this thing fits so tight that these dovetails have tendency to chip out. But if you really want to see what it looks like, I can use a mallet if I wanted to. I can get a piece of scrap wood. Because I really want to see how this thing fits. I'm going to lay my scrap wood on top of it and tap this down. And that, you could see, is a tight fit. Ow, ouch, ow, ouch, ouch! Just kidding. On this, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get my mallet because I think I can hit better and stronger and wider with the mallet. Bop, bop, bop. I guess this isn't easy as he said. I always like to put this nice and flat on here. I tap it down. Of course, it works a lot easier if somebody's holding this for you. Bop, bop. And I don't know know if you can notice. Try to pull this apart. Go ahead. Go ahead, you're from the hood. Go ahead. You're a tough guy. Go ahead. Try to pull this apart. If you think of how strong that is, this will never come apart if I pull it this way. Look at how great those dovetails look. That looks tremendous. If I sand that up, that thing will look like $1,000,000. I have one complete done, and look at how tight that is. I really like that joint, and I'm glad I chose that. I should have 1/4 of an inch or 2/8 of an inch on this side and the same thing on the other side, which will give me the total width of this whole box to be 5 7/8, which is what I was shooting for because I've allowed for that dovetail. Any questions? Here is my question to you. I'm setting up to cut a dovetail. Where does my X go in relation to this whole board? Where does it go? Does it go on the end? Does it go on the edge? Does it go on the outside surface, the inside surface, or the other end? X always goes on the inside surface. So that's your correct answer for this little quiz. The X goes on the inside surface. Remember, that's the first thing that you're going to mark out, and that's the easiest. The worst surface should be that inside surface because that's the side you're going to see the least. Next time when you come here, I'm going to cut 3 other sides, and I'll literally have my box together. The problem with that is there's no bottom. I've seen kids gluing their 4 sides together, and the problem is when they put something in the box and they lift it up, the something stays there because there's no bottom. We need a bottom in this. So that's what we'll do next time. We'll cut the 3 dovetails. We'll cut the groove for the bottom. Then the box will be pretty much done. We'll sand it up and then decide how we want to finish it. This is so cool. Again, if you master it one time, you can master it 126 times. The hardest part is always going to be the first time. So remember, X goes on the inside surface. Good luck laying out your dovetails. Have a good job boxing.